Hello, everyone. I am finally ready to give my thoughts on New World. Okay, let's talk about the MMO market for the first part of this recording. If we look at all the MMOs that are either currently being played or are available, we will see that there is World of Warcraft still, Final Fantasy 14 online, I think is the numbering. It's so hard to keep track of Final Fantasy numbers, but I think it's 14 online. Whatever, y'all know what I'm talking about. Um, Guild Wars 2, and then, of course, New World being the one coming up. So, I've received mixed communications on World of Warcraft. Some have said that it's been dying for a little while because of stuff that they've done, and others have said that there's been a combination of that plus the whole Activision Blizzard thing that has resulted in players leaving um, World of Warcraft. So I don't know what's going on with World of Warcraft, and I don't know if it's still like a viable MMO, but at least I'm aware it's there. Guild Wars 2 has seen a resurgence in recent times because of the announcement of the End of Dragons expansion. Final Fantasy 14 Online has been taking in a lot of players from World of Warcraft, and so it's seen a bit of a spike. So I would say probably the three MMOs that are going to be mained right now is New World, Guild Wars, well, when New World comes out, Guild Wars, and then Final Fantasy Online. It would seem at this time that there's more Battle Royales than there is MMOs. Given that there's not much of an MMO choice right now, I can sort of understand New World slipping in here. But we'll get back to that here in a little bit. Next thing I need to talk about or cover is just the way New World is. Somebody who knows more than I can probably correct me if I'm wrong or add to the information. But as I understand it, New World is being created by a relatively newer or inexperienced studio that just has money being thrown at it from Amazon. So Amazon isn't the creator of it, they're just throwing the money at it to make it happen. If that's the case, then that would certainly line up with what I'm seeing. I can detect that this is not exactly an experienced studio, or maybe they just made a lot of mistakes. I don't know which of the two, but either way, it does make me kind of concerned for the future. If they are inexperienced or new. Okay, so moving on. Let me talk about all the other stuff. Let me talk about optimization. I've talked about this in my build recording, but I'll go and bring it up again just so nobody has to go over there just to hear this part. But I did notice that there is some wild inconsistencies with the performance of certain computers with New World. I've noticed some people with older hardware doing better and some people with newer hardware doing worse. It's weird at how inconsistent it is. I can say personally, me, I have a 3060, which, by the way, I'm very thankful for because I got a lot of help in real life to get that. If I did not get the help that I did, I would not have that 3060. But my 3060, running at 1080p, 120 hertz, was not hitting 100 FPS when I was playing the New World Open Beta. So that's not a good sign. And PS, I was on medium graphics settings, not high. So medium graphics setting, 120 hertz, 1080p. Yeah, I couldn't even crack 100 frames. So maybe there's something I have to do to optimize it, but in the settings. But I can tell you just by doing or using what was given to me by the game, I was not able to crack 100 FPS, and I have no idea why. But either way, the frames are inconsistent because I noticed I wasn't the only one having issues with it. I noticed when I was playing open beta, a lot of people were chatting in the global chat about their problems with their performances, and some had better video cards than I did. So, yeah, I don't know. There's some wild inconsistencies there. Okay, moving on. Now I want to talk about armor and weapon variety. It's off to a good start with the variety, but I feel like they could have done a lot better. And what I mean by that is not just the balance, but also just the selection of weapons. Because as it stands, for example, when it comes to non-mage ranged weapons, you only have access to a hatchet, what I'm guessing is a short bow or recurve bow, and then a musket. So you have 2 short to medium range options, and then you have 1 long range option. So there's no alternative to the musket. There's no alternative play to long range. Looking at the melee side, and I know this is nitpicking, but I just want to kind of use this as an example. As far as the melee side is concerned, there's only 1 weapon truly dedicated to armor piercing, and that's going to be the Warhammer. The musket can armor pierce, but I'm talking about melee. So if you want to talk about total weapons, it's going to be musket and Warhammer. There's not another armor piercing weapon in the game. So there's also that issue to look at. Though, issues aside, I will say that the game does look really nice, and I think it does have potential. Oh, I did also forget to mention something else, but I'll get back to that in a minute. But anyways, yeah, so it has potential, I think. It just needs a little bit of work, not just with the optimization, but maybe just add a few more weapons to put in a little bit better of a variety. I think that it would be nice if they could just add a few more things in to kind of, complement certain play styles or things like that. And I'll get to those in just a minute. But yeah, I think if they can do that and then maybe look at the harvesting / crafting system, I think that would be good. Let me go and talk about that because it's not, well, let me go and focus on that next because it's not really a negative or a positive. I'm kind of neutral on the topic. Okay, so the whole harvesting and crafting thing. I think it's cool that there are games out there. New World's not the only one that does this, where you can freely harvest or craft as you see fit. Because once you get into games like Star Wars The Old Republic, for example, and by the way, I liked that game a lot. But Star Wars The Old Republic, it kind of followed a similar system as Guild Wars and some other MMOs in which you were only allowed, I think it was like 2 base crafting skills. Yeah, I think with Star Wars, it was 3 unlocked if you used premium currency or something like that. Either way, you only got 2 crafting. So it did limit you, and it did force you to rely on other players for crafting your stuff. And the issue with that is, in certain games, and I'm not saying Star Wars specifically, but just certain games in general, whenever you make it possible for a player to determine the market, it can go good or it can go bad. A player could get greedy and then inflate the prices, or you could find a good player who's willing to be fair and make a trade or sell for a reasonable price. But once you have that player market, you really can't expect one or the other. You get both of those types of people when you make a player-based market. Actually, probably a good example of this is Path of Exile. If you look at Path of Exile, there's certain uniques that just inflate so hard in certain seasons. We're talking like double prices, like, the next season after type of stuff. So I do appreciate the ability of, being able to craft everything on your own. But because it does prevent the potential for, that player dominant market. But at the same time, it makes resource gathering a pain in the butt because now everybody's fighting for the same resources. So unless you're like mad dedicated to harvesting, the chances of you finding a node of whatever resource you're looking for is going to be pretty slim because everybody's looking for it. So I'm pretty neutral on the topic, but yeah, let me go and talk about some stuff that they could add now. Some things that kind of tie back to what I was saying earlier with variety. I did forget to mention that there was a lack of shield-based weapons. I think it would be great if they could add like a mace or like a one-handed hammer to go with shield. That would be pretty nice, something like that. But as far as the other stuff I was mentioning, the variety, I'll go ahead and start with the range. So I think New World at some point, I'm not saying right away, but at some point should add a long-range alternative to the musket, something that can actually do damage at a distance. For that, I'm thinking either a longbow or a crossbow. Whichever of the two is picked, I would like to see it have a stat spread of Constitution primary and Strength secondary. I'll go and explain why. As it stands, the highest raw damage weapons in the game are on Strength. So if you were to add a long-range weapon into the game that's Strength only, then you would run into too many players with the ability to do either ranged or melee. If you were to do all Constitution, then you would run into players who not only do a lot of damage, but can outlast any other range build because of Constitution being the only stat that they need. So the only way that I can foresee of balancing a brand new long range weapon, and while also giving it the game a bit of a different stat spread, is just to make a Constitution primary and Strength secondary. That will kind of dilute it a little bit, because I did notice that's what kind of balances the musket, because the musket actually can't do as much damage as the short bow, which is fair because the musket does have a lot of reach with its auto attacks, of course, and that's another matter I'll have to discuss in a moment. But with the musket standard attacks, it doesn't have any damage drop-off, meaning you can hit at any range, whereas the short bow does. So while the short bow does more damage than the musket, or DPS, I'm not sure which term to use there, it's limited by range, so that's perfectly balanced. The musket is perfectly balanced by the fact that it has a secondary stat of intelligence. Because it has that secondary stat, people can't just focus dexterity and expect to get the most out of it. They will be behind in damage in comparison to the short bow. So what I'm trying to say is this, is that coming back to the longbow or crossbow idea, that diluting I was talking about, where you make it strength secondary, it would do a similar thing as the musket, is what I was trying to get at with that whole explanation. With that said, though, I want to also ask for a melee weapon on the same page. So Constitution primary, Strength secondary. The melee weapon I would be looking for in New World is something that's a true standoff weapon. Because right now, the only quote-unquote reach weapons that are in the game is going to be the rapier and the spear. But even then, their reach isn't that far. Sure, it's a little bit more than other melee weapons, but it's not like true standoff levels. I'm talking like 3 to 5 meter reach. The rapier can do that with Tondo, but I'm talking like non-skill based, always 3 to 5 meters attack. In that regard, I would like to see a melee weapon be able to do that while also adding a little bit more variety to the game. So in that regard, I would suggest either a pole axe, maybe something like a Lucerne Hammer would be a little better. Yeah, Lucerne Hammer or Halberd. I would say Lucerne Hammer or Halberd, or actually a Pike. Well, I guess the game already has a spear, so adding just an extremely long spear probably would be boring. But yeah, I would say like a Lucerne Hammer or a Halberd probably would be better, seeing as there's already a spear in the game. And then that would have standard 3 to 5 meter reach. 3 to 5 meters I think would be fair because if you look at your ranged weapons, 10 meters is considered, well, 10 meters or greater is considered their optimal range for the short bow and the hatchet. Their 10 meter range is considered optimal for them. So 5 meters would be half of what they are. And that would be perfectly fair, depending on how the skills are handled. But another thing, too, that I would like to see, in addition to being a true standoff weapon, is a weapon that can actually penetrate armor. As I was mentioning earlier, there's only really the musket and the warhammer for penetrating armor, so I would love to see that be a thing with the game. That's why I was kind of thinking Lucerne Hammer, because then that way you get like a spear-like weapon, and maybe you can add them some skills that could like shield break an enemy, like do a ton of stamina damage or something like that. Something like that I think would be really cool to see. So yeah, that's kind of like my melee and ranged weapon request. I have one other request though for New World, just whenever. You can call it whatever you want to, but I'm just going to call it the Banishment Staff for now. I would like to see some sort of offensive staff for the focus stat, so that way healers can do something other than just heal, because there will be some downtimes at the very late levels, even towards the end game, where you will just burn through all of your mana trying to heal your group. As it stands, healers don't really have a great option for that. Right now, they have the Fire Staff, because the Fire Staff gets free heavy attacks, but there's not really any options besides that, because it's focus really pairs well with intelligence or casting in general, more so than it does hybrid builds. I mean, I guess you could do that. You could do like a hybrid life staff build, maybe, but I don't know. I just think it pairs better with intelligence. So in that regard, maybe it would just be easier if you paired, or if you just added a different weapon for the focus stat called Banishment Staff, or whatever you wish to call it. So my vision for the Banishment Staff would be something that doesn't do the damage of the fire or ice gauntlets, but it would make up for it in stuns, knockbacks, and slows, and maybe a disease as well. One of the things that this game is lacking, in addition, is other weapons with disease, the reduced healing thing. So it would be nice to see something other than the hatchet that could cause disease, and maybe Banishment Staff could do that. And then that would give more of a quasi-offensive option for the focus stat, and allow healers to do something else when they're waiting for their mana to come back. And so maybe that's what Banishment Staff could do, is maybe be an extremely low mana option, or at least be a way to get mana back during those downtimes, or maybe if you have nothing better to do, if like your group is healed and there's no immediate need for healing, then that could be done. Oh, let me come back to that whole longbow and crossbow idea. I realized I forgot something. In addition to the standoff melee weapon idea, having armor penetration, I would like to see the same for the long range option, whether that be the crossbow or the longbow. Another thing too I would like to see is for it to not be focused on headshots, because we have 2 ranged options right now that deal with headshots. So I would like to see one that actually has an end passive that doesn't do headshots. Maybe something that's either armor penetration or does give you bonuses for consecutive hits type of thing. Something like that I think would be best. But yeah, if they could just, add some things like that to the game, I think that would help tremendously. Oh, and crafting. Yeah, let me get to crafting now. Man, I'm so scatterbrained. I'm sorry. Okay, so for crafting, I will be fair that this was just my observations during open beta, and maybe it will change when the full release happens. But I noticed at the very end of the game, once you reach that max gear score, that literally everything is going to be named uniques or legendaries, whatever name you wish to use. At least on the weapon side. I didn't check armor, I'll be fair, but while legendary items, uniques, or whatever you wish to call them, are great in certain games, I don't think it really is going to work for New World, because once you have something that's fixed stats, like what's that one sword's name? The one that name sword that does backstab damage, like that one has just pure dexterity, right? So dexterity doesn't mesh well with the sword because it's only 0.85 per dexterity, right? And also, to be fair, with certain builds, you may not be going dexterity anyways, but I would like to see some sort of crafting item for weapons, armor, and even jewelry. Let's just call it Mastercraft right now. And you can name it whatever, but let's just call it Mastercraft. So Mastercrafted will guaranteed have a gem slot, max gear score, has a good chance for rolling whatever affix or prefix you seek, and only has one trait. That's what I'm going to call it, the keen stuff, that stuff you see, I'm going to call that a trait. Well, 1 to 2, let's be fair, yeah, so 1 to 2. And then that will leave the legendaries or uniques to have 2 to 3. So Mastercraft would have less traits, but have a better ability for rolling the prefixes or affixes you need. That would enable hybrid builds, or at least specific stats, a little bit better. And that's something I would personally like to see, with the game as it goes forward. That way it's just a little bit better for certain builds. But other than those requests, I think that New World has potential, and I'll just see where it goes. But my conclusion is this. The MMO market is starved because for some weird reason, I guess, between this year and the last year, there's been a focus on Battle Royales, it seems, or it feels like. So, given that the market is MMO starved to a certain degree, I would say New World's perfectly fine for anybody looking for a new MMO. It's only $40. There's no subscription yet, so okay, whatever. However, if this was released at a time when there was plenty of MMOs to choose from, I would say I would either not recommend New World, or it would be pretty low on my priority list, because I feel like they could do a lot better, and there's certainly a lot that they need to do to fix kind of just certain things, and I've given some examples, and as well as said a lot of things that I would like to see. But yeah, so if it weren't for that, I would say it wouldn't have much of a chance in my book. But that's all I can really say on the matter. Thanks for listening.